Several years ago, our oldest son, Paul, had a job as a landscape engineer for the school district. And he and another engineer were called out to a playground they needed to grade. I don't know what grading a playground means, but evidently there was standing water. And so Paul and the other engineer brought their equipment onto the playground, and they had to wait before they started because it was recess. So they waited, and before they started their work, Paul wanted to go and just investigate where they were going to start grading. And so as he walked onto the playground, he saw a group of boys, just a few boys, kind of huddled together. And now he wasn't allowed to interact with the kids because, he's a worker, he's supposed to be doing his job, and the kids were playing. But he saw them pointing at him and whispering kind of loudly and talking to each other and pointing at him as he was walking. Well, he went to survey where he was going to grade, and then he walked back toward the equipment and the other engineer, and as he walked past the boys again, he could hear them now, and they were saying, "You ask him. No, he's right there. Go over and ask him. I know, you can ask him." Well, he got back to his equipment, and he asked his friend, he said, "Do you know what those kids want?" And of course the guy said, "No, I don't have any idea what they want." And so they just waited by their equipment to see, what events would unfold. Well, it wasn't long before this small group, then was, kind of surrounded with more boys. And they all were trying to figure out how they could speak to Paul and the guy he was working with. But all of a sudden they realized these boys were chanting, and they were looking at them. And then more kids joined. They couldn't tell exactly what they were chanting, but as more kids joined, they started fist pumping, and they brought out a chant that was, "Dig us a hole, dig us a hole, dig us a hole." Well, so these boys saw Paul and the equipment and thought to themselves, "You know what? We could get a hole. I mean, what is more fun than a hole in the middle of the playground?" And so they continued to chant, "Dig us a hole, dig us a hole." And Paul and this guy, they couldn't stop laughing. Pretty soon, I'll just tell you the rest of the story right here. I want you to go to my book and read the rest of the story, but pretty soon, the teacher raised her hand to say it was time for the kids to go in. The kids all lined up at the door, and now everybody is chanting. They've all joined in on the chant, "Dig us a hole, dig us a hole." As they walked into the school, they could hear them chanting all the way down the hallway. The teachers weren't doing anything about it. They just probably were glad they were, kind of together, and they were just walking the same way. So I just think that is the best story ever. And Paul and I just had Paul tell that story to all of my family members. It was just such a great story. Even though I didn't understand what Paul was doing and how he was going to do it, but here's what I imagined. I imagined that Paul and this other guy were standing on the playground, a couple of shovels, and they were going to do something to the playground. The kids probably thought, well, there's some shovels, let's dig them a hole. And so I asked Paul, I said, what in the world would make those boys think that you guys with your shovels would dig them a hole, on the playground? And he stopped for a minute. He goes, "Mom, we were out there with a John Deere tractor, and we were going to dig a hole." He even sent me a picture of the tractor, and all of a sudden I understood, well, they weren't looking at a guy with two shovels. No, they were looking at a tractor. And they thought to themselves, what could a tractor do? A tractor could dig us a hole. And they were just so excited about that, they couldn't help but chant. And you know what? Do you know who you're actually praying to? You are not praying to a God who just occasionally glances at you and may occasionally give you an answer to one of your prayers. You are praying to the God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. You are praying to the God of the universe. And I think sometimes we forget how big and how strong and how awesome God is. Where we want to say, would you give us this? If you have time, could you answer that? If not, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. But instead, we need to recognize who God is. Children, when they pray to God, they know how big God is. They are not afraid of asking whatever is on their heart. But as adults, we filter those prayers and we forget just how big God is. And God asks us to come to Him as a child who is expecting all of His inspiring greatness. So today, I want to encourage you just to spend a few minutes reflecting on who God is, how great He is, and how awesome it is that you get to enter before the throne and have a conversation with Him. Don't rush it. Let your mind just think about everything God does right now to keep the world in order and everything God has done in your life. The scripture says in Ephesians 3:20, God can do anything, far more than you could ever imagine or guess or request, even in your wildest dreams.